Hey guys, this is Yahuda Lee coming back to you. It's been a while. I was recently reading or thinking about the birth of Abraham, and it just dawned on me. Well, actually, a while back, but this is the first time I kind of want to get out there and talk about it. Is the similarities to the birth of Abraham as well as the birth of the supposed JC. I've said many times before, the New Testament, in my opinion, is nothing but a rehash of the Old Testament as well as the Apocryphal books, and with some sprinkled pseudepigrapha here and there. So what I wanted to do is point out in this particular talk is the similarities between the birth of Abraham and JC. And while doing that, I wanted to point out this supposed New Covenant or the New Testament and show where the New Covenant is really described within the Old Testament, which a lot of people, well, I haven't heard many people speak on it. And again, if we aren't studying, then how will we know? So hopefully this will provide some insight. And again, just something I thought I'd share. So anyway, let's begin to look at what some of our ancestors wrote in Enoch 104. And while I'm reading these things, I want you to also think about the supposed hidden books, or the books that have been taken out, the King James Version, and ask yourself why they've been taken out. Again, because there's a lot of information in there that the enemy doesn't want us to know. Because we have to remember our scrolls were taken away from us. They were manipulated. And then, once upon a time in history, we were told we couldn't read. Well, I guess while all that was going on, the oral histories are still being passed. So I guess our ancestors could have rebutted what the new supposed Bible was all about. So anyway, so that's just a thing of history. But anyway, I'm going to be starting out in the book of Enoch 104, verses 7 through 11, just to show that our great ancestors even prophesied that they will be writing their own books. So anyway, Enoch 104, starting at verse 7. So now will I point out a mystery. Many sinners shall turn and transgress against the word of uprightness. They shall speak evil things. They shall utter falsehood and create a great creation and compose seraphim in their own words. But when they shall write all my words correctly in their own languages, they shall neither change or diminish them, but shall write them all correctly, all which from the first I have uttered concerning them. Another mystery also I point out. To the righteous and to the wise shall be given seraphim of joy, integrity, and of great wisdom. To them shall seraphim be given, or scrolls, be given, in which they shall believe, and in which they shall rejoice, and the righteous shall be rewarded, who from these shall acquire the knowledge of every upright path. In those days, said the Creator, ye shall call the children of earth, and make them listen to their wisdom. Show them that you are their leaders. All right. So there we see that our ancestor Enoch is already talking about our scrolls being taken away, and they're going to write their own and utter falsehoods. All right. So that was prophesied many millennium ago. So again, that's what the point that I'm trying to make in terms of the supposed New Testament. All right, so when we talk about the New Testament, let's look at what Wikipedia has to say concerning it, or the definition on how it's described. So New Testament from Wikipedia, and it says the New Testament is the second division of the Christian biblical canon, the first being the Old Testament, which is based primarily on the Hebrew Bible. The New Testament discusses the teachings and persons of JC, as well as events in the first century Christianity. Christians regard both the Old and the New Testament together as sacred scripture, or what's put together now. The New Testament is a collection of Christian texts originally written in Koine Greek language at different times by various different authors, while the Old Testament canon varies somewhat between different Christian denominations. Right? Because remember, some books were taken out. Look at the 1611 King James that has, I believe, 77 or 81 books, right? And now the newer version, those books are taken out. So I'll start over. So with the Old Testament canon varies somewhat between different Christian denominations. The 27-book canon of the New Testament has been almost universally recognized within Christianity since at least late antiquity. Thus, in almost all Christians today, the New Testament also consists of 27 books and blah, 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 blah. All right, so again, it's talking about the New Testament pretty much being solid from day one. There weren't any discussions concerning what needs to be taken out. Well, actually, I take that back because there are some hidden New Testament books. But once that 27-book canon was given a go, there weren't many go-backs of what should or should not be included in the versions of the printed Bible versus the Old Testament. Depending on which version of the Bible you have, you'll see some books that are there and some books that aren't. And you have to ask yourselves critically, why were those things taken out? So before I get on to the birth of Abraham, because I'm going to read from the book of Jasher. Well, actually, let me go back. Let me go to Jeremiah because I want to show you guys what the New Testament really is. It's not what they tell us it is. It's something different. So let's look at Jeremiah chapter 31 and then verse 31 through 36. And I'm going to be reading from the Sefer. All right, so Jeremiah 31, and this is the actual new covenant. Verse 31 through 36. So behold, the days come, says the Creator, that I will cut a renewed covenant with the house of Yasharel and the house of Judah. All right, so he's cutting a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not the whole world. Verse 32, not according to the covenant that I cut with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt, which my covenant they broke, although I was a husband unto them, says the Creator. But this shall be the covenant that I will cut with the house of Israel those days, says the Creator. I will put my Torah in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and it will be their most high, and they shall be my people. All right, so house of Judah, house of Israel, new covenant on our hearts. He will be the one that we worship, and we will be his people. All right, and they shall teach no more every man his neighbor. Verse 34, and they shall teach no man every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, know the Creator, for thou shalt all know me, for the least of them unto the greatest of them, says the Creator. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Thus says the Creator, which gives the sun for light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divides the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Creator is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, says the Creator, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. All right. So again, to recap here in Jeremiah 31, he's talking about the new covenant that he's going to cut. It hasn't happened yet, with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It's not the whole we are the world thing. It's not that John 3:16 that we saw, that falsehood that they wrote. All right. So the covenant is going to be within us. It's going to be innate. Like we blink. We don't even think about it. We won't even have to teach our brothers and sisters what this covenant is going to be about, because it's going to be on our heart and we're going to be living it. We're going to be living his laws, statutes, and commandments. All right. So let's move on to Joshua chapter 10. Because what I want to do is, I've heard it said before, well, the book of Jasher is not in the King James Version. Well, the book of Jasher has been referenced in the King James Version. And I don't read the NIV and any other newer texts. I know that they screw around with those even more. But what I want to do is show that before I begin to read the book of Jasher, that it is actually referenced. And although I'm reading from the Sefer, You can look in your 1611 King James Version of the Bible, and you will see the book of Joshua being referenced. So I'm reading Joshua chapter 10, verse 13. And it says, "The sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves unto their enemies. Is not this written in the cipher or book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hastened not to come about a whole day." All right. So there's one reference of the book of Jasher. All right. And lastly, we're going to look at the first book of Samuel. The second book of Samuel, chapter 1. All right. So another reference to the book of Jasher. So 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 17 and 18. "And David lamented with this lamentation of Saul over Jonathan his son. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the Sefer or book of Jasher." Okay, so that's another reference. So when people refer to the book of Jasher, again, if you're studying, you should know that when somebody references that book exists. Even though it might not be quote unquote canonized, the book exists. And the book is very detailed, more detailed than the book of Genesis and Exodus put together. And there's some details, and then, like I said, the enemy or the powers that be doesn't want us to read or know. All right. So now let's look at the birth of Abraham. So I'm going to be going to the book of Jasher, chapter 7, and I'm going to start on verses 49 through 51 and then read all of chapter 8. All right. Or most of chapter 8 anyway, if not all. Okay, so Jasher chapter 7 and verse 49. Oh, and let me give some background first. So Nimrod was a king once upon a time and known as a mighty hunter. Once upon a time, he was following the laws and statutes of the Most High, and was doing well in regard of leadership and following the Most High. Then suddenly he turned himself, or he began to turn away from the Most High, or the Creator. And because of that, he began to do as people do as they turn away. He began to create false idols. He began to lead the people astray and all that kind of nonsense. So anyway, he wanted to reign forever and did not want that reign to be threatened. So anyway, let's go ahead and read about. Okay, let me go a little further. So now we have Terah, which is Abram's father. Terah was a statesman for Nimrod. So he had favor within Nimrod's eyes, and he had a high position. All right, so let's read starting at verse 49. "And Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects. And the king and the princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. And Terah took a woman, and her name was Amthalo, the daughter of Cornebo. The woman of Terah conceived and bore him a son in those days. Terah was 70 years old when he begat him. And Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, because the king had raised him in those days and dignified him above all his princes that were with him." All right, now let's move on to chapter 8. Okay, chapter 8, verse 1. "And it was in the night that Abram was born, that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and all his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And when all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look at the stars. And they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens, and it swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of heaven." All right, does that sound familiar? Wise men and stars. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at the sight, and the sages understood this matter, and they knew its importance. They said to each other that this only betokens the child that has been born to Terach this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever. He and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands. And the wise men and conjurers went home that night. In the morning, all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in an appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, Behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing get known to the king in latter days, he will say to us, Why have you concealed this matter from me? And then we shall suffer death. Therefore, now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw, and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear. And they did so, and they all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground. And they said, May the king live, and may the king live. And we heard that a son was born to Terach the son of Nahor, the prince of your host, and he yesternight came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when your servants went out from the house of Terach to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And your servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and were greatly terrified. And we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this thing applies to the child that was born of Terach, who will grow up and multiply greatly, and become powerful, and kill all the kings of the earth, and inherit all their lands, he and his seed forever. All right, so they're prophesying. Now, the Lord and King, behold, we have truly acquainted you with what we have seen concerning this child. If it seems good to the king to give his father value for this child, we will slay him before he shall grow up and increase in the land, and his evil increase against us, that we and our children perish through this evil. And the king heard their words, and they seemed good in his sight. And he sent and called for Terach, and Terach came before the king. All right, so verse 15. And the king said to Terach, I have been told that a son was yesternight born to you. After this manner was observed in the heavens at his birth. And now therefore give me the child, that we may slay him before his evil spring up against us. And I will give you for his value your house full of silver and gold. So this guy is basically saying, give me your son so I can kill him. That's some arrogance for you right there. Verse 17. And Terach answered the king and said to him, My lord and king, I have heard your words, and your servant shall do all that his king desires. But, my lord and king, I will tell you what happened to me yesternight, that I may see what advice the king will give his servant, and then I will answer the king upon what he has just spoken. And the king said, Speak. And Terach said to the king, Ayan, son of Morit, came to me yesternight, saying, Give unto me the great and beautiful horse that the king gave you, and I will give you silver and gold and straw and provender for its value. And I said to him, Wait till I see the king concerning your words. And behold, whatsoever the king says, that will I do. And now, my lord and king, behold, I have made this thing known to you, in the advice which my king will give unto his servant, that I follow. And the king heard the words of Terach, and his anger was kindled, and he considered him in the light of a fool. And the king answered Terach and said unto him, Are you so silly and ignorant, or deficient in understanding, to do this thing, to give your beautiful horse for silver and gold, or even for straw and provender? Are you so short of silver and gold that you should do this thing, because you cannot obtain straw and provender to feed your horse? And what is silver and gold to you, or straw and provender, that you should give away the fine horse which I gave you, like which there is none to be had in the whole earth? And Terach left off speaking. And the king left off speaking. And Terach answered the king, saying, Like unto this has the king spoken to his servant. I beseech you, my lord and king, what is this which you did say unto me, saying, Give me your son, that we may slay him, and I will give you silver and gold for his value. What shall I do with silver and gold after the death of my son? Who shall inherit me? Surely then at my death the silver and gold will return to my king who gave it, and borrow money for death. And when the king heard the words of Terach and the parable which he brought concerning the king, it grieved him greatly, and he was vexed at this thing, and his anger burned within him. And Terach saw that the anger of the king was kindled against him, and he answered the king, saying, All that I have is in the king's power. Whatsoever the king desires to do to his servant, that let him do, yea, even my son. He is in the king's power, without value in exchange, he and his 2 brothers that are older than he. And the king said to Terach, No, but I will purchase your son for a price. And Terach answered the king, saying, I beseech you, my lord and king, to let your servant speak a word before you, and let the king hear the word of his servant. And Terach said, Let my king give me 3 days' time, till I consider this matter within myself, and consult with my family concerning the words of my king. And he pressed the king greatly to agree to this. And the king hearkened to Terach, and he did so, and he gave him 3 days' time. And Terach went out from the king's presence, and he came home to his family, and spoke to them all the words of the king. And the people were greatly afraid. And it was in the 3rd day that the king sent to Terach, saying, Send me your son for a price, as I spoke to you. And should you not do this, I will send and slay all you have in your house, so that you shall not even have a dog remaining. And Terach hastened, as the thing was urgent from the king. And he took a child from one of his servants, which his handmaid had borne to him that day. And Terach brought the child to the king and received value for him. And the Creator was with Terach in this matter, that Nimrod might not cause Abram's death. And the king took the child from Terach, and with all his might dashed his head to the ground, for he thought it had been Abram. And this was concealed from him from that day, and it was forgotten by the king, as it was the will of providence not to suffer Abram's death. And Terach took Abram his son secretly, together with his mother and nurse, and he concealed them in a cave. Sound familiar? And he brought them their provisions monthly. And the Creator was with Abram in the cave, and he grew up, and Abram was in the cave 10 years, and the king and his princes and soothsayers and sages thought the king had killed Abram. All right? So there you have Abram being born, stars giving signs within the air. Sounds familiar. The wise men, another familiar thing. A spiteful and jealous king, familiar. And killing of children, or one child in this instance, familiar, Herod. And also the hiding of the child, again, familiar. So again, I'm trying to show or prove in just one instance, because there's many, where the New Testament is a hack by the heathens that stole our scrolls for their own purposes. Because again, when you think about that new covenant, it was for the house of Judah and the house of Israel, not the entire world. All right. So now let's move on to Matthew chapter 2, and then I'll wrap this up. Okay. So in Matthew chapter 2, we have the birth, or the coming birth of JC. So again, remember what we just read in the books of Jasher, the last verses in 7 and all of chapter 8, and listen to what we have in Matthew chapter 2. All right. So now, when JC was born in Bethlehem of Jude in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came magi, or wise men, from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born the King of Judah? For we have seen his star rising in the east, again, rising in the east, and are come to worship him. And when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where the Savior should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judah. For it is written by the prophet, And yet Bethlehem in the land of Judah are not least among the princes of Judah. For out of you shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privately called the Magi, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child. And when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. All right, another trick, just like Nimrod. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw rising in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Miriam his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of the Creator in the dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed unto their own country another way. And then when they were departed, behold, an angel of the Creator appeared to Joseph in the dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Mizraim, or Egypt, and be there until I bring you word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. Okay, so again, child being hidden. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Mizraim, or Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Creator by the prophet, saying, Out of Mizraim have I called my son, or Egypt. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked by the Magi, was exceedingly wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the Magi. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, In Ramah there was a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted because they are not. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Creator appeared in a dream to Joseph in Mizraim, or Egypt, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. Okay? So, you saw the similarities there. We had a very disturbing king, whether it be Nimrod or Herod. We saw a child being born, Abram and JC. We saw stars in the skies. We saw wise men, or magi. We saw a proclamation given out to the people to go seek this child, that the child may be destroyed. And before the child could be captured, or with the turn of events, the child and his parents had gone off to another land. So again, there are various similarities between the Old Testament and the supposed New Testament. And like we wrote and like we read in Wikipedia, the New Testament was nothing but, or was supposedly a new covenant. But Jeremiah 31 shows us what the new covenant will be for the house of Judah and the house of Israel. Not everybody, not this John 3:16 nonsense. And the Most High, or the Creator, repeats that time and time again. And again, a lot of the books that are taken out of the canonized Bible reflect this, and some of the ones that are still in there, they reflect this. But the pastors are not teaching this. They're teaching this "we are the world" thing, right? So that's my message for today. Hope it sheds some light on some things you may have questioned, and if it sparks more questions, and hey, reach out or just do some further research. Again, this is Yahuda Lee, and I wish you guys peace and happiness.